Out of curiosity, does anybody know how much Jalen Milroe owes for taxes for owning a place in Baton Rouge?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, HSA's radio network. Luke Robinson, that's me. Bama Online's Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and I'll tell you about FanDuel here in just a little bit. They're the best, and you know they are. But Jimmy, I also thank you every day for joining us. I know I got to say that every time too. Jimmy, last night, it really is a question. Does Jalen Milroe owe taxes in Baton Rouge? I think he probably does. But the good news is, even if he owes them, they ain't able to catch him to pay. But that last run he had, I mean, you and I did a pod right after the game, and it's a little disjointed. Like, these are all pretty well put together. Is a little disjointed, but it's all off the cuff thinking, right? And I'd seen the run last night. Holy cow, was he motoring on that last run last night? I mean, it does make you wonder, like, when I heard them say this last night, like, that's the longest run of Milroe's career, I'm like, oh my God, how is that the longest run of his career? He's the strongest, leanest, meanest, fastest man on the field. It doesn't seem like it should be.
I know for during that stretch where Jalen wasn't playing well or running it well, I was alluding to or hinting or just saying, hey, Jalen's banged up. I mean, I think it's now, I would hope, completely clear to everyone that he was banged up for 3 or 4 games. I mean, he had a burst and a speed to him last night that he just hadn't had since Georgia. I mean, or since maybe early, in the Vandy game. He was back physically. Obviously, I think the passing game is something that's going to need some work against, maybe Mercer's a good time to do that. They have to work on some things, but in terms of being in command of the field, in terms of decision making, it was really impressive stuff. And of course, LSU, like you said in the joke, it feels like Jalen Milroe has 1,000 yards rushing against LSU in 2 games.
Yeah. I mean, it does.
And here's a weird thing.
I mean, it's not like it feels that way because he does.
And here's a weird thing, though, about the game. And again, I'm going to study it more today. I'm going to rewatch the first half and put that up on BOL. Alabama still didn't run the ball great from the running back position. I think Justice Haynes and Jam Miller averaged 2.9 yards a carry. And so that's the weirdest part of the whole game to me is it's not like Alabama ran the ball great on LSU. Jalen Milroe did. He ran the ball stupendously. But Alabama's run game from the running back position continues to be a bit of a mystery. Again, Jam and Justice 2.9 yards a carry, and Jalen had something like 15 yards a carry, which is really remarkable considering how often he ran the ball.
I think he's got 16 touchdowns on the year. Is that right? Rushing?
I'm not sure.
I'm trying to find it. Like, it's harder to find a quarterback's rushing stats than their passing stats. You Google, hey, Jalen Milroe stats, all their passing stats come up, because they think quarterback. But how many quarterbacks in the country that start every game have more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns? I'm going to guess it's Jalen Milroe and whoever Army's quarterback is.
Yeah, it does seem that way. And it's just that he is – hey, and kudos, like I said, last night, I mean, what I was really trying to emphasize last night, guys, in the immediate aftermath of the game is credit to Nick Sheridan, who came up with the game plan. I'm sure it wasn't complex. To me, it's just like Nick Sheridan watching the film going, they really struggle to stop QB runs. So here's plan A. We're gonna run Milroe, who's healthy. He's healthy and he's back and he's ready to run. And they can't stop this. So plan A is we're going to run Milroe. And if they overcorrect to stop that, here's plan B. Alabama just didn't have to get to plan B. Yeah. Plan A worked great. That's what offensive coordinators do when they're good at their jobs is the first plan is the right plan. and then you go out and execute it. And I just think it was a great night for Nick Sheridan. LSU's defense is not as bad as Jalen Milroe made them look last night. They're actually better than they were a year ago. Someone said, oh boy, LSU's defense hasn't changed. Last year they gave up, this is going into the Alabama game, Luke. Last year they gave up 420 yards a game. This year they're giving up 360. I mean, that's a dramatic improvement, but Alabama still made them look pretty bad last night.
All right, this is my initial thought. I hadn't hashed it out. Let me try and say it. I think that their defense also, it was worse last year. It also was made to look worse because their offense was so dynamic. And everybody's like, holy God, if y'all could just get one stop, we could win a game. But y'all can't even get one stop. Now, last night, Milroe made them look awful again, obviously. But I would say that's more – what Milroe did is an outlier to an outlier. I mean, I know that Marcel Reed had a nice attack against him for Texas A&M, but people can't do what Milroe did because Milroe is Milroe. When he's doing that, and here's the other thing you mentioned about the rushing. That's a great point about, Jam and Justice. In fact, they said it late in the game. The longest run by a non-Jalen Milroe last night was like 8 yards.
Yeah, I think it was like Richard Young's touchdown, like an 8-yard touchdown run. Was that right?
Yeah, but that was before Richard Young got in. So,
okay.
Yeah,
well, and that was still 8 yards, I think. So I was assuming that was the play. Man, again, there are things Alabama needs to address. I think now that we realize that Alabama could be or should be in the playoff field if they win out. Now, to me, what's in front of the team, Luke, in terms of what needs to be done is the team has to improve. So when you get to the playoff, you can advance. And I still think that I hope, and I'm sure this isn't the case with a lot of Alabama fans. I mean, just making the playoff is going to be good enough for a lot of schools. I don't think it should be good enough for Alabama. I think you get in the playoff and advance, and the team still has to improve. Jalen has to improve. The team can play better than they did last night, even though I give, again, Nick Sheridan an A and Kane Womack an A, and the way the defense executed for 60 minutes an A. That was a good offense that they basically shut down. And
you give Kalen DeBoer an A. I mean,
sure.
he was he looked like a confident dude from the moment he was out there. But my point, what I was about to get to, and I got off track, it's my fault. So Milroe, like on the third touchdown, if he had handed that ball off to Justice Haynes, Haynes walks in. That's the one where Haynes was the lead blocker, and there was nobody in front of Haynes. I mean, I'm sure Haynes was like, why didn't I just do this?
Right.
But so we could have had a little bit better running output from the running backs, but Milroe was doing so well, there was no need for it. There's no need. Why even chance it? And by the way, again, some people look at this as an insult to Jalen Milroe. He is our best running back. He is.
Oh, he is. He's unquestionable. Well, I mean, the numbers tell that story in dramatic fashion in terms of an average yards per carry. For whatever reason, I think on these RPOs, a lot of the Milroe plays are RPOs, and he keeps it. And again, that is a read. It's not a decision that Jalen makes before the ball's ever snapped. I mean, it's theoretically, it's supposed to be a read based on whether a specific player, usually a defensive end, is he crashing down on the quarterback or is he taking the pitch guy? And Jalen makes a decision based on that. He obviously usually makes the right decision. They're not 100% of the time. No one ever does that. They don't even do that at Army and Navy. I mean, they don't make the right decision 100% of the time. But Jalen makes the right decision most of the time. Otherwise, they wouldn't run the heck out of RPOs, and they do it every single Saturday. So they clearly like the play because Alabama executes it correctly. What's surprising to me, Luke, is that Jalen keeps it so often because that's what the defense is giving them. And it's like every week the defense is like, we want Jalen running this ball, not one of those backs. And I wonder if it's because they figure, man, Justice and Jam are good players. We just assume Jalen have the ball. At least we're getting a hit on the quarterback. Well, I don't know, but I'm just surprised people don't game plan to, hey, when they run that RPO, make that guy pitch the ball. But teams just don't do a good job of that.
In fact, I'm wondering if other teams' defensive coordinators listen to us, because all summer we've been saying how good Justice and Jam are, and they are good. But what we kept glossing over was that Jalen Milroe is our best running back. So I'm wondering if these DCs are like Luke and Jimmy said, be careful, watch out for Justice and Jam, and forget Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, you would just think that defensive end who's going to be put in conflict most of the game, that defensive end needs to be taught to crash on the quarterback, make him pitch the ball, because but teams just either don't do it, or Alabama does a good job of disguise, or just that Jalen Milroe turned to a good player. Here's some inside baseball for you guys. The last staff didn't think Milroe ran those RPOs well. That we didn't call a lot of them. We didn't have them. They didn't think he did it well. This staff calls him constantly, and Milroe does it great. You know what that is to me? It's a little harsh, but coaching.
Yep.
They're like, oh, he doesn't do that great. Well, coach him. Coach him. That's the job,
And by the way, I did find Milroe rushing stats. How about this? I wouldn't have thought this at all. Last year, Jalen Milroe. Well, actually, let me start it the other way. This year, Jalen Milroe has 114 carries for 565 yards and 16 holy cow touchdowns. Last year, in all his games, he had 161 carries for 531 yards and 12 touchdowns. So he has 34 more yards on 47 fewer carries with 4 more touchdowns this year.
That's just
against
improvement.
A tougher schedule.
That's improvement. It's efficiency. It's these RPOs. And again, it's coaching. And this staff did, and they've got some really good offensive coaches, but me and you were ahead of this curve a while back, Luke. This staff, the biggest difference in Jalen is I really feel like Nick Sheridan and his offensive team embraced Milroe as the quarterback. And last year's offensive coordinator was like, I want to play somebody else, and then that permeated the relationship the whole season long and made it sort of difficult. Now, they did better as the season went on, as the begrudging acceptance. Well, this is our best chance to win, so I guess we'll do the best we can with it. And it improved. It did improve, but not like Jalen has been this season. And I think it's because this staff was like, hey, we got a dude, a quarterback. We're going to build it around him.
Time to talk a little FanDuel. If you're watching this in time, then you can get in on some NFL action today on FanDuel, because it's so much fun. Get ready for that NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5. I did 10, but $5 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on an NFL all in one place, if you can believe it. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats and view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. It's that simple, yo. You'll get started with 150 smacks and bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's only at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment count more with FanDuel, which, of course, is the official sports bet book partner of the
National Football League.
Okay, so we will talk about Mercer this week, and no need to get into it. But I do want to say I'm really hoping we see one half out of Milroe. I don't want to get him banged up again. You and I believe he was banged up. I just got, before this podcast, a friend of mine called me and goes, doesn't this solidify in your mind that Jalen Milroe was a little banged up? And I was like, yeah, but everybody I talked to that would know told me he wasn't banged up. I don't know if it's the greatest cover-up in the history of sports, but I'm just saying I don't want him banged up again. I don't even want a chance of it. And I want Ty Simpson to get some meaningful, fun snaps and where he can actually pass the ball. So I want Milroe to play a half against Mercer. It kind of stinks that Mercer is like leading their conference or whatever. Why we can't schedule a true patsy? Like, y'all can't get – I want to schedule like – who did Auburn play in the first game? Was it Alabama A&M? Yeah. I want to play them this time of the year. That's what I want to do. Beat them 73-3 or whatever. That's what I want to do. I don't want to play Mercer, who's going to fight and claw and scratch. I know we should beat them by 100. I know. I'm just saying. But Milroe needed this game last night so badly, in my opinion. It was, and let me tell you something. I do need to add this. Look, when Milroe does that dance after his touchdowns, it might be the sexiest thing I've ever seen. As a heterosexual 52-year-old man. I'm like, how in the world does he even do that with his body? I mean, like, I'm trying to do it now, and like, I pulled a muscle in my shoulder. I don't know how.
The rest of us pulled a muscle in our eyes.
But it is, and it's that kind of confidence we got to get back from him. And look, I know people think we read too much into some of Milroe's stuff, but you do go back to like the Vandy game where he's on the sideline and his face is in his hand and it looks like he's disconnected from the world. Let me, as an emotional guy myself, people can read me like a book. So I know that sometimes your body gives off a vibe.
He is. You know, Bryce and Jalen Hurts were so good at poker. They were poker-faced quarterbacks. Milroe is not. You know how the game is going looking at his face, and that's fine because we're all made differently. And but Milroe, I do think it's maybe one of his best traits and issues is he's an extremely emotional player. I think that shows up in terms of, hey, when things are going great, they go great. When it goes bad, it can go bad. I think that's typical of people who are highly emotional, and he is. And but man, it's great when it's great. And I was super happy for him, really cementing, I think, a legacy at Alabama too. I mean, in terms of assuming Alabama wins out, which is a heck of an assumption to make, because I've said all that game at Norman is, even with their loss to Missouri, I mean, that game at Norman is a challenge. I mean, we lost to Vanderbilt and Nashville. I think we should take Oklahoma and Norman pretty seriously. So let's, but assuming Alabama wins out and they're in the playoff, and Milroe delivered Alabama to the college football playoff in both of his seasons as Alabama's starting quarterback, is a big deal. I know that Nick Saban has ruined Alabama fans from not realizing what a big deal it is, but it would be a big deal at 133 other places. So it needs to be a big deal here.
Man, that's so true. And again, I want to emphasize for anybody who thinks, hey, you know, some body language expert. I'm not, but, and we're saying this is okay. So I'll tell you what, when Milroe is happy, it gives you chills because you see, I mean, it's like having a child, you know, when your child is young, and Jimmy, I got 4 kids. I've been through a lot of Christmases. Yeah. When they get a gift they like and their eyes light up and you're like, that's all I want. I don't want anything for me anymore. I want it for them. But when they get a sweater from their aunt and it, you know, and it looks awful, and they go, thanks, Aunt Beatrice. I don't know who has an Aunt Beatrice. I don't know why.
Is it a bunny? Is it a onesie that looks like a pink bunny?
Like, thanks. I can't wait to wear this at school and get pummeled. But and you can, like, they can say thank you all they want to, but you can see it, and there is a beauty to that. Now, again, when it's going bad, it sucks. But when it is good, like last night, man, if you weren't, I'm telling you, every one of his touchdown runs, I felt like I was running with him, like not as fast as him, but I was there, you know, in spirit. And he is, I'm with you. He kind of has cemented his legacy. Here's another thing. I'm very curious, and this may be something that has happened a lot, and somebody will say, Luke, you're so stupid. I wonder how many other teams have scored, one player score 4 touchdowns rushing on an opponent, at least, and let's say an opponent as good as LSU, an unranked opponent, because last year they were ranked, this year they were ranked, and when Sean Alexander did it in 96, they were ranked. How many times has a team had one player score 4 rushing touchdowns against another worthy opponent? I bet it can't be that many. And I can think of 3 times that Bama has done it against LSU, and that is wild. Like, how many people have scored, how many guys have scored 4 rushing touchdowns on us? And if they did it, it was like that team's only done it 1 time against us ever. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. And LSU is usually really good defensively. They're obviously not really great defensively right now. Again, improved over last year, even dramatically improved over last year, but they're still not. They're not great defensively, but most of LSU's history, they are, or certainly in modern times, they are. Here's one thing about LSU's team last year. I think this shocks people. I brought it up a couple times, and people are like, you got to be kidding me. You know, if we had a 12-team playoff last year, LSU with 3 losses missed the playoff field by just 2 spots. Because we don't think of LSU last year as being good. Well, in the final college football playoff ranking, they were 13th. And obviously top 11 make the playoff field, and then the group of 5 team. So they were just 2 spots out. And so that was a good LSU team last year. We just didn't think of it that way because they were nowhere close to a 14 field. But now by having a 12-team field, our minds have to expand a little bit about, okay, who's really good here?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I'm with you. We need to be celebrating. Now, it's not celebrate yet. Like you said, we hadn't beaten Oklahoma yet. We hadn't beaten Auburn yet. We hadn't even beaten Mercer yet. I will say this. We're going to talk about the SEC and the SEC picture in the next segment. If you're an Oklahoma fan and player, I don't know how you don't sort of mail it in after last night. That was so bad last night for them. And we'll talk about it right after this. And I'm going to talk about game time, baby. It's time for game time. It is game time with Game Time all the time, because if you need a ticket to Alabama Mercer, go to Game Time. It'll be the best price. It'll be the best seat. You'll be able to see where you're going to be able to sit. And it's great. You get a view of it. And, get your bad self down there because it's going to be fun. Hey, I told y'all this last year or 2 years ago when Bryce Young was playing, and I was like, I was on the fence about going. Then I was like, this may be my last chance to see Bryce Young in person. So maybe Mercer game is the last chance for you to see Jalen Milroe in person. So go check him out. He deserves it. And use Game Time to go get that ticket. You'll get the best price, guaranteed. It's so easy. I've used it for World Series, Major League Baseball, football, NFL, college. I've used it for concerts, used it for college basketball, used it for everything, and used it all over the country. I swear. I'm not kidding y'all. I've really done this. I sound like Joe Biden. Like I'm being serious. But yeah, y'all need to go check out Game Time. You're going to love it. I love it. You'll love it. I'm not lying. I should say I'm not lying this time. So talking a little SEC, the scenarios now for Alabama to get into the SEC championship are numerous. Obviously, they need to win out. I also think that Georgia's beating Tennessee is a must, obviously, which I think will happen. Really? Tennessee's probably walking into a bear trap, and especially without Nico potentially. And so now, after all this hubbub, after losing to Vanderbilt for all things, Alabama's got a really good chance to make it to the SEC championship game. That's insane.
I'm not sure how I feel about it. First of all, I would start with this. If we're considering a 3-loss team won't make the playoff field, going to the SEC championship makes me nervous because I hate putting too much faith in the committee. And see, I think there should be a rule. I mean, just a flat out rule that says a loss in a conference championship game is not counted against your resume, because it's just unfair that you could play yourself out of the playoff in those conference championship games. And meanwhile, the team that benefits from that is sitting at home. They're just sitting at home. They didn't have to play in a conference championship game, and they're sitting at home, and they benefit from the fact that you qualified to get in this big game and then had to play an elite team, because that's who you play in these championship games. Those other is elite teams. So what would make me a little nervous, though, see, I don't have any trust in the committee. I don't trust the committee. And I hope that playing in the conference championship game and potentially getting a 3rd loss doesn't mean you're out of the playoff. If that's the case, I'd just soon not play in the conference championship game at all.
You and I have been saying this for a while. Now that I'm on the precipice of it, though, I'm sort of like, I'm cool with it. And I do have faith that won't happen. I really do. I have faith that that the committee won't punish Alabama this time. Now, look, if Alabama had a loss to Vandy, a loss to Wisconsin, let's say that didn't affect their SEC championship prospects, and a loss to Tennessee, and then we lost to Texas. If we had 4 losses, I would say, okay, I don't even think we deserve it. But in this particular case, I think that you're talking about a Tennessee team that very well may make the playoffs themselves. And if we were to say lose to Texas, who I think would probably be the representative on the other side, I don't think they'd punish us for that. Now, the punishment may be instead of hosting a game, you're traveling. Okay, I can live with that. I mean, that's fine. But I don't think they'll punish us in the sense of that we won't make it.
Can you imagine how unfair that would be? Let's just say in this hypothetical that Alabama is in a 3-way tie for second place in the SEC, and by tiebreaker, Alabama gets invited to Atlanta and loses. So they're out of the playoff, and the two teams they were tied with that lost the tiebreakers, they're in.
Yeah,
because they didn't have to play and lose. Well, you say that won't happen. I don't. It certainly should not happen, and I honestly don't think it would. But it worries me.
Yeah,
I'm going to be worried.
Well, I mean, we say, and I should qualify it. I say that won't happen. I'm also the guy that said losing to Vanderbilt won't happen. So things can happen, but I don't think it'll happen.
I have a low opinion of the committee, and I have for three. I used to not, but pretty much the last 3 years, I found a lot to complain about. Mostly how the committee doesn't properly factor strength of schedule. I think they don't. I think they barely do. I think they somewhat barely do, when it should be pretty much the number one thing they do.
I couldn't agree more. And I also say, when people say factor in strength of schedule as number one, that doesn't mean it's the only criterion.
No,
I think that
you have to win some games.
I look at Indiana, for example. I watched them play Michigan yesterday. Michigan is not a good football team this year. I know they won the national championship last year, and kudos, and they beat us. Kudos. They're not good this year. In Indiana, in what was clearly their biggest game of the year so far, sort of screwed around with them. I mean, like, in fact, at times, Michigan looked like the better team. So I'm sort of like, that was your chance to make a statement. Now, of course, this week, Indiana at Ohio State, they'll have a chance to make a statement. But I think we all know they're not winning that game. And if they don't win that game, I'm fine if Indiana gets left out when you play nobody else. You play nobody else.
I think they will be in at 11-1, and I'm going to be saying that we don't know that SEC teams sitting at home with 3 losses aren't better than this Indiana team. We don't know that, and I feel like they probably are, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say I think we do know it, and they are.
Okay, I'll just name one right now. South Carolina, that's a 3-loss SEC team. If South Carolina played Indiana in a neutral field, I would bet on South Carolina. I would. Now, it could go the other way. I mean, I'm not sure. But I would bet on South Carolina.
No, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. And okay, so obviously we got a lot more to digest from this LSU game. I've got to watch a lot more of this. I stayed up late last night just like watching highlights and stuff like that. I know Jimmy does his rewatches all week, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And, you know, while I hate this time of year because football's coming to a close, I do love this time of year. No more bye weeks for Alabama. Like we got game after game after game. I know Mercer, some people don't include that, but I do. I feel like it's a great way to get spirits lifted again. And so I'm even looking forward to that game. And then Georgia-Tennessee next week is going to be very intriguing. And I guess that we're pulling for Georgia. I mean, because if Georgia wins, number one, it makes our win against them look better. Number two, Tennessee gets knocked back a notch. And I have seen some projections. And these are all crazy right now because a lot's going to happen. Just like, picking an NCAA bracket right now is kind of crazy. But the two I've seen so far have Alabama traveling to, I think, Tennessee as the 10 seed for number one. So we go back to Tennessee. There's no way that happens because Tennessee's going to move a lot one way or the other after this weekend. And then the other one, I think Alabama was traveling to, I think it was Penn State, but I'm not sure. I could live with either. I could live with either.
I believe if Alabama wins out, and I'm not even counting Atlanta. I just think a win over Mercer, a win over Oklahoma on the road, and a win over Auburn. I believe Alabama will be in a seed, and they'll be hosting. I think they will. I think they'll move up because there's just some losses to come ahead of Alabama, and hopefully they start. I mean, I haven't looked at the schedule strength. We had the 11th, toughest schedule going into this weekend, but we just played a top 15 team on the road. I would assume Alabama's got a top 5 schedule, and I hope the committee takes that into account.
It is going to bother me. Let's say this is a lot of hypothetical. I'm going to be extremely bothered if Alabama wins out, doesn't even play in the SEC, forget playing in the SEC title game. If they win out and Indiana wins out except for Ohio State, like we think will happen. And if Indiana travels to Bama, I can live with that because I think what you're saying is Indiana, your schedule was bunk, but your record was good enough in a Power 4 that we want to put you in. Okay. But if let's say that the seeds were flip-flopped, and let's say Alabama's the 10 and Indiana's the 7 or whatever, or 8 and 9 even, and Alabama has to travel to Indiana, I'm going to call BS on the committee. I'm going to be like, hey, we're never playing a tough schedule again.
It's so true. And again, I don't think it's putting a lot on the committee to play some hypothetical matchups. And I know Alabama lost to Vanderbilt, and that's bad. But would Indiana beat Georgia? Would Indiana have beaten Tennessee and Knoxville? Would they beat LSU in Baton Rouge? I mean, those are questions the committee should be asking. I know there are hypotheticals and makes you assume a lot, but in my mind, that's the job, because you're trying to find the best teams, not simply lining up teams based on one loss record. Again, kindergartners could do that. But one final thing about Mercer, I want to say real quick. I know this is why I'm not a head coach, and why I should never be a head coach, and why I'll never get a head coaching job, because I have opinions like this. But against Mercer, the way I look at it, Luke, two groups that just shouldn't practice much this week are playing the game. Anyone who's banged up, anyone who's like nursing something, don't practice, don't play in the game. Secondly, I would go to my seniors, my seniors that definitively won't be back playing college football, and just ask them, you want the week off? I mean, you worked your butt off all year. You just want kind of a week off, not playing the game? Because, I want to get the younger players snaps in a game situation and play. And I know that this is why I'm not a head coach, because they're like, oh, so you're not taking this game seriously. In fact, I would take it seriously, but I would play my younger players. I think they need the reps, and I trust my younger players to win the game. If Austin Mack is our quarterback Saturday, we should win this game.
That's very fair. I think that's very fair. And one other point that you said, and now I can't remember it. What did you talk about? Oh, the committee. Here's the thing. If the committee does things like, well, record-wise, Indiana was better than Alabama, then why do we have a committee?
Then why do we have a committee?
The committee is there to look at things like strength of schedule. See, I know Danny Cannell loves the NFL way, where everybody is slotted. You went 12 and 5, and you went 11 and 6. No matter who you played, so y'all just No, that's why we have a
take
committee.
Is so bad. Anyone that has that take is just terrible. It's not a recognition of the reality of what goes on in college football.
I totally agree. All right, y'all join us tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.